Hi, it's Julie Sweeney, CFO of Zendesk, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1085.
We have a global business. It's complex. We have legal entities, customers, offices across the globe. So that, just brings about a lot of resource needs, time spent, trying to manage this. So from that lens, simplicity. I've been encouraging the teams to think about how we can simplify things down, actually cut back on all the stuff out there so that we can really focus the time on what the highest ROI impacts of our time and energy is. And then the other side is automation. So that can, naturally take the form of a buzzword like AI, but what that means in particular for us is getting upstream, accessing the data, making sure it is in a clean, structured, accessible spot so that we can then reduce all the manual cycles that the team does to prep and query and work with that data and actually maximize all the analysis of the data. So, as we think about expanding the team and skill sets in the future, that automation element might lend itself to some skill sets that expand our ability to do that.
Fresh out of a hedge fund analyst role, Erik Rothschild walked into an interview at a Chicago-based trading firm and did something unexpected. He pitched actual trade ideas to the portfolio manager across the table. That bold move earned him a spot on the team and eventually a portfolio of his own. It's a mindset that has quietly shaped a somewhat unusual path to the CFO office. You'll hear about that journey and much more on today's episode. Our talk with Erik Rothschild begins after this.
When it comes to company spend, most finance teams are on defense, reacting to surprise spend, chasing receipts, saying no. But there's a better way. Meet Brex, the AI-powered spend platform that boosts a company's control, earnings, and speed. 99% of customer spend is compliant. 11 million hours saved on expenses and accounting through automation. $681 million plus back to customers in business building rewards. Make every dollar count with Brex.
Hello, we're speaking with Erik Rothschild, CFO of Cin7. Erik, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Erik, as you might have guessed, we always like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, trace your career path back to its early days for us. And, which specific moments, whether they were challenges, milestones, or unexpected detours, do you believe influenced your readiness to step into this role? What would come to mind?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'd start off by saying my background is probably a little more non-traditional than what you'd see, from the backgrounds of your previous guests. Started the first part of my career in the investment space, working for a couple different hedge funds. So I think there's some interesting anecdotes and stories that are probably unique to myself in this role. Started my journey in the facing the storm that was the 2008 financial crisis as a finance major graduating, which was always fun. But managed to land at a larger multi-strategy hedge fund in 2008, first as an analyst, and then later transitioned into a front office trading role as a trader and portfolio manager for a smaller volatility-focused fund based out of Chicago. But, both those experiences were great environments to start a career in, despite the time period of 2008. I'd say both were quantitatively focused work environments, complex, a lot of very smart people you were working alongside. You really learn a lot about risk as well in those types of environments. So my first role was really to optimize baskets of securities for that fund that traded across all different asset classes, with the goal of maximizing financing rates and yield across those portfolios. And that time really was exposed to all those different types of investment themes, investment strategies. And like I said, just learned a ton about risk as a very young person early in their career. But ultimately really wanted to get more into an investment role, which led me to a company, Peak Six, based out of Chicago, and convinced them somehow to let me join as a trading assistant. I did that by bringing some trading ideas to the interview and actually pitching the portfolio manager in that interview at the time. So either way, was able to join that fund, and eventually over time, over the 4 years I was there, moved into a trading role, portfolio manager role, investing an actual portfolio of the fund's assets, utilizing what was called a volatility arbitrage strategy, which I won't get into the details unless you want to. And really, I think that whole experience taught me more than anything how to assess decisions through the lens of an investment. So how to formulate an idea, how to assess the risks, both micro and macro, determine the sort of magnitude or size based on the risks and based on your conviction, and then monitor the progress and the feedback to really improve that whole process end to end. And so in hindsight, I didn't know at the time, but I think that framework I use all the time in my capacity these days as a financial leader. And I would actually argue, most executives across the organization do in some capacity, whether it's who to hire, where to invest their time or resources, what teams to build, what products to focus on, et cetera. So it was pretty fortunate to have that experience early on.
That's so you have an investor mindset for that first chapter. You were really, I'm curious if you are already thinking, I'd like to get to the operations side of things, or what is, at that place in time, where do you think you're headed?
I was pretty open-minded at that time. Having spent the career in the investment world, my father had come sort of up through those ranks as well in his career. So I was pretty well versed in that space. Hadn't really thought about leaving aside from my time at Peak Six. I had moved to San Francisco for a stint to launch a new fund. And during that time, I actually got involved with some friends who tried to launch a startup. It didn't ultimately work, but it sort of gave me the itch to see what the sort of building side looked like, and had always kind of been interested in that entrepreneurial environment, specifically on the technology side, just given we use so much data and information and technology in both those funds. So I think that probably set the stage a little bit for what was eventually moving over to the more corporate finance side and into this role ultimately today, which then of course led me to Sovrn.
Yeah, Sovrn, and it's an FP&A. You move into the FP&A track, or how would you characterize it?
Exactly. I was actually the first hire on the FP&A team there, and then spent the next 6 years building out both the team and the FP&A function at Sovrn. And
why did they think you were the right guy? They're like, hey, we have this investor here. He's really he loves to noodle on numbers, or why? How did you sell them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually never really asked them that, but could have. I think my guess is that that sort of investor mindset that you mentioned. A lot of what FP&A does is through that same lens. What's happening, or what has happened? How do we break it down into its components, explain it in a way, communicate that out in a way that people can understand, digest, and then figure out what to do with that information. On the investment side, it's making an investment, maybe tweaking an allocation, exiting an investment. And on the FP&A side, it's potentially adjusting a business line, making a business decision, right? So I think and obviously it's a very data-rich environment as an investor in that space. And Peak Six, Sovrn, coming into it, I think was a a very optimal environment to land in, coming from that background of markets, because what Sovrn did at the time was run a programmatic advertising exchange. And what that means is websites throughout the world, at least at that point, had space that they would want to sell off to advertisers to send their ads in and display as you visit the webpage. Sovrn sat there and worked with those websites to help them sell and auction off that space. So, 35 to 50 billion ad calls per day, data points attached to each of those. It was a data-rich, complex environment that had those market dynamics, and I think there was I had a lot of comfort with that environment, just now applied to one specific business as opposed to more in a macro perspective.
And I want to just point out, you invest 6 years at Sovrn, career years. Am I right about that? So you definitely dug in there. Did it give you exposure to the CFO? I mean, is this role, and again, I think in your earlier roles, you didn't really have maybe you collaborated with a CFO, but here it seems like it was more traditional, just given you were in FP&A and the relationship would have been, you might have been one of their reports.
Yeah, a lot of exposure. So I was hired on at the time by the CFO. It was a small team, so worked with him very closely. And he is still to this day a mentor of mine, so we have a great relationship. But in that time, there were just a ton of interesting problems to solve and challenges to tackle. It was a industry that was constantly evolving. And so in that 6 years that you mentioned, I think the business grew, 3 to 4x. We did 5 M&A acquisitions. We did 2 large equity raises, debt refinancing. We just had periods of incredible growth, periods of decline, making some hard decisions, downsizing, kind of everything in between. So got to witness firsthand from a great mentor and leader. And then there was a period of time where that had to kind of be put to the test. He had left in 2018. There was a sort of a 6-month window when I was effectively the most senior financial person in the business. And that was both exciting and stressful. But started reporting to the CEO, began, presenting financial results to the board, just assuming a lot of that sort of day-to-day CFO responsibility. And on top of that, we completed a fairly complex equity round and then also kicked off an M&A process. So a lot of period of growth for me. I had someone that, showed me the ropes, and I learned a lot from and how to operate in that role. And I think that's really set the stage for me for both that role and then the role since, including this current one.
I think what you were just describing for us, so there were times where, the CFO had left the company and you're being called in to present to upper management or the board members. Am I just echoing that correctly here? Or,
that's right.
So you're really tested.
I was.
And
yeah.
She asked for a raise. I mean, how long did you think this was going to stay? And again, at the time, you're VP, I think, of FP&A or something
That's
like
right.
that. And that would be a huge jump, I would think, for anyone to expect to go into a CFO role. But you're there and you're wondering, okay, are they going to hire another CFO? Is someone going to come in? And can you just help us understand what your thinking was at that time? And a lot of career builders out there find themselves in tough spots like that, where, let's face it, it was a high pressured role, and the future was a little uncertain. Someone, you'd have a new boss shortly, perhaps. Who knew?
That's exactly. It was, there's a lot of uncertainty. We were doing a lot. So, I'm sure at the time I was so heads down, I didn't think stop to think about the macro picture as much. But I think the idea was always to bring in another CFO, just given what I knew about the board and kind of what they wanted. So that expectation was there. But I also knew that I had a window just to do a lot of things for the business, to step into some shoes, even if they were temporary, that would, give me some experience I could take with me for the rest of my career. And so I was really trying to just be open to the experience and to learning and to the feedback. Because I think we go through our careers, and in hindsight, it kind of looks 2020, but when you're in it, you don't really know where the next opportunity is going to come from, the next door is going to open. So, my advice to people earlier on that are sort of in those situations is you got to be open. And if somebody offers you the opportunity to take on a project, take on an initiative, take on more, I encourage people to take it and then go figure out how to do it if you have to after the fact.
Well, I just want to, we've been talking a little while now, and I just want to point out to the folks that you do jump, you change jobs, and then when you enter Cin7, you come in on a very senior tech, finance executive level. You're not yet CFO, and from what finance leaders tell us, this is sometimes the ideal way of doing it, coming in as a senior person for a number of years. In your case, it might have been just 2 years, and you recently stepped into the CFO role the start of this year, roughly. How am I doing? Am I close? Is there something, another milestone here between Sovrn and
Yeah.
where you are today?
So I had, my time at Sovrn was fantastic, but really had gone deep in sort of one vertical, being FP&A. I realized that in some regards, I was topped out, in that channel, and wanted to expand the skill set, wanted some new challenges. I hadn't managed accounting, hadn't managed sort of the other side of the fence from the CFO lens, typical CFO lens. So the role I took after Sovrn for a couple of years was with another marketing technology company called Social Native, more in the content creation space. But that role allowed me to manage accounting. Actually, also got the opportunity to oversee HR and legal as well, which was an interesting experience. But really opened my eyes to the CFO suite of responsibilities beyond just the one lane of FP&A. So that was, I'd say, sort of a stepping stone. And then the Cin7 opportunity, when it first came to me, was an opportunity to do a similar type of thing, but at a much larger scale for a more mature organization. And at the time, the CFO at the time, someone I'd worked with in the past, reached back out when he was transitioning into more of a COO president role, assuming more responsibilities, and needed somebody to come in and help out with the finance accounting side of the business. And so when I joined, that was the initial mandate. But really early on, it started to migrate those CFO responsibilities to me, and it's sort of been an evolution now, capped by the title change more recently.
Okay. Well, we may have some additional career-related questions for you a little later, but right now let's find out about Cin7. Tell us about this company. What's it about today? What are its offerings?
Sure. So Cin7 is a inventory and supply chain management software that helps our customers, who are primarily product sellers, integrate their whole inventory, their sales channels, their point of sale, and really their full supply chain management into one central system. They do that in order to optimize their business operations, right? And so, we as consumers know how easy it is to buy a product these days. Amazon has a one-click buy button, right? But for the modern product seller, it's a much more complex world. So these product sellers have to, which they in turn are their own businesses, they have to, manage their sales channels, which today could be their own Shopify site, Amazon, Walmart, retailers, B2B, you name it. They have to manage suppliers. They have to monitor their production process, manage the warehouse inventory levels, and they have to know the profitability, by SKU, by product across these different channels, which is even more complex in today's world with tariffs and other uncertainties, right? And then on top of that, they have to anticipate demand for all these products so that they don't sell out and miss out on revenue, or they don't overstock inventory and tie up capital that they could be used to further the business. So our product is really designed to do all of that to help those businesses in one central system and grow with the customer as their business grows as well. Business itself is primarily SMB focused across most verticals and industries. We have over 8,000 or so customers, and it was originally founded in New Zealand. And then our private equity sponsor, Rubicon Technology Partners, took a controlling stake back in 2019 and then relocated it out here to Denver, which is kind of where we are today.
Okay. And usually we ask here about the capital structure. I saw Rubicon made a sizable investment last fall. I would think that would be quite the milestone. But can you share with us as far as an abbreviated history of the company's capital structure? Yeah.
Sure. So Rubicon, like I mentioned, it was originally founded in New Zealand as a small, just single technology application by the founder, and Rubicon took a controlling stake back a number of years ago in 2019. More recently, the transaction you're referring to is what's known as a continuation vehicle. So earlier Rubicon fund and investors exited. More recent investors and some new ones came on board on behalf of a larger group, and really just to further the runway for us as a business under the stewardship of Rubicon and their associated investors. And so we continue to really appreciate being a partner with them. They're great to work with, and we hope to continue that for a while.
Another business headline for Cin7 last year was the acquisition of Inventoro. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about, has it been very acquisitive in the past, this company? Is that a significant acquisition last year? What would you tell us?
I'd say, first of all, the business, yes, has made a number of acquisitions in its history and probably will continue to in the future. But as far as Inventoro goes, size-wise, it wasn't a large acquisition from sort of a business perspective, but from a product impact perspective, we are very excited about it, and so is our customer base. And what the product essentially does is it is an AI application to help customers, the same customer base we already work with, forecast their demand for their products. So it will use machine learning to analyze historical data sets of that customer's transaction history, of other patterns of information, to then give them suggested actions to take. And primarily, the way that results in value for the customer is they can reduce the stockouts, and they can reduce the inventory tied up in overstock, and they can just more effectively manage all of their channels and understand where demand's going to peak, where it's going to ebb and flow, so that they can just run a more efficient business generally. So we're pretty excited, and we're going to be expanding some of the applications for that sort of AI technology in the coming months and hopefully years.
So if I understand, or trying to think, what's unique about this offering that you acquired? It really interprets the inventory data in such a way that it allows customers to really understand, whereas so many companies may pay attention to their customers. This is observing the ebb and flow of inventory. How am I doing?
That's right. So our customers themselves, right, are being product sellers, being businesses. They have both suppliers that they manage, and then they have the people purchasing their product, the demand side. Yeah. So our software that we sell to them helps them manage that end-to-end process. The demand forecasting part is obviously for those customers to anticipate how the demand for their products that they are going to sell, and that specific Foresight AI application we just talked about plugs into that customer's historical database and surfaces insights for them specifically.
Interesting. All right. AI, let's segue into the world of AI. It seems like this was, and many acquisitions are being packaged as AI acquisitions. So I'm a little, healthy degree of skepticism here. But no, this absolutely seems like it's just such that the AI capabilities here were attractive. Will we see other acquisitions where AI is perhaps the attractive part of the business? Yeah.
Potentially. I think that there's a lot of organic opportunity for this sort of base technology here to be applied to a number of different feature sets. So the demand forecasting is one component. Our general Cin7 product, though, also has warehouse management, returns, the sourcing, production, and manufacturing. So you can just imagine that across all those different types of use cases, layering in some machine learning component that surfaces insights for you as a customer using our software to take action and improve your business, free up capital, reduce costs, whatever it is. We just feel like there's a lot of growth there already using this and expanding it. We also, I think, just more generally for our business, see a lot more potential for, sort of weaving in AI throughout the business to improve our own internal business itself. So some of the ways that we've utilized that is around, for instance, if you navigate to our webpage and you can ask a chatbot questions about our product, about the industry, and it'll also help us book demos. So it'll prompt the visitor, and we've actually seen an uptick in leads from that chatbot helping us add leads to the funnel. And then further down in the funnel, we also have some tooling now that works with our sales teams and our customer success teams and our support teams to surface insights on what they're seeing thematically across all those types of customer interactions to also improve the engagement with the customers and just help streamline those parts of the business. Support chatbot. I know a number of companies use similar types of things, and we see strong deflection rates. Deflection meaning the chatbot was able to handle the answer satisfactorily for the customer without any human interaction. So there's a number of applications that we've started to build into our own internal business and that we're pretty excited about from both a efficiency side, but also a productivity side.
These new developments that you're describing for us related to AI, are you participating in these conversations? We know finance leaders are, with the customer success team but what about the product side of this? Do you find yourself eager to have those conversations and understand better as you make these investments in some of these, in the software and the technology?
Yeah, a lot of what my role over the last, call it 6 months, has been as it relates to some of these initiatives has been really understanding from a business case what the teams are trying to accomplish. Stress testing their hypothesis that this tooling can solve those business issues, and then analyzing from a ROI perspective what the cost impact is, and then what we think we can get in return. In some cases, it's efficiency gains by certain teams, which then we see in certain metrics, like on the support time, we've seen a reduction in our first response times. We've seen increases in our customer satisfaction tied to those engagements. So that's one area. Other areas could be, because the AI can or these tooling can help us do a task. There's just less human resources need to then also throw at the same task, which can help on the efficiency side. So, my role and some of my team's roles have really been working with those business leaders to really understand, stress test, analyze, and then come to a business decision ultimately that how it can help the business.
And curious as to whether you are likely to change how finance is organized, deploy your people differently. If you're going to make a hire, it's not where perhaps you might have made it even 18 months ago had you been in the CFO office. You do it somewhere else. What would you tell us as you look at finance, that finance team you have? Where would you invest?
Yeah. The need, what I've seen in my career is the needs from a team perspective evolve as the business evolves, obviously. Earlier stages, which I've been a part of organizations that were very early in that journey, you need just smart multitaskers that can kind of pivot and do anything, particularly in those stressful, constantly changing environments. And then as you grow, you're trying to build the infrastructure. You're trying to build the machine that is a finance and accounting organization. And so, the individuals involved in what that looks like now changes. Skill sets required are different. I think we're at a stage now where we have a really strong team. We have smart, talented individuals on both the FP&A and the accounting side. So I feel really good. I think from an initiative standpoint going forward, what we're trying to focus on is, we have a global business. It's complex. We have legal entities, customers, offices across the globe. So that, just brings about a lot of resource needs, time spent, trying to manage this. So from that lens, simplicity. I've been encouraging the teams to think about how we can simplify things down, actually cut back on all the stuff out there so that we can really focus the time on what the highest ROI impacts of our time and energy is. And then the other side is automation. So that can, naturally take the form of a buzzword like AI, but what that means in particular for us is getting upstream, accessing the data, making sure it is in a clean, structured, accessible spot so that we can then reduce all the manual cycles that the team does to prep and query and work with that data and actually maximize all the analysis of the data. So, as we think about expanding the team and skill sets in the future, that automation element might lend itself to some skill sets that expand our ability to do that.
But as you look to educate the organization and sort of incent the behaviors across the organization, tell us something about some of the numbers or metrics that you're trying to get people focused on.
Yeah, I think going back to my time at Sovrn really exposed me to the depth of data that's available to look at. And sometimes that was just analyzing data to see it's almost like throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Sometimes you don't know the hypothesis to ask about the data until you start getting in there and seeing what's happening, and then that stimulates ideas. So I'm this one of the areas of focus over the last, call it year or 2 years since I've been here, has been moving us more along the spectrum of deeper level data. It's the second and third clicks down. Not just the number of customers upselling, the price per logo that's being upsold, but then go a step deeper. And can we see, are there metrics attached to those things that we then can aggregate and from that use to predict who could be the next customer that we should target to upsell or any number of other applications. So, it's an evolution. There's no finish line. I think we're further along today than we were in the past, and we have really smart team members and other individuals throughout the organization help us as a business move in that direction. But obviously, still a ways to go.
We're looking for a moment of insight that you've experienced along the way that led you to, pursue an opportunity, avoid a risk. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Sure. Yeah. I'll take you back to my time at Sovrn and tell you about a project that made me realize that finance can impact the business through more than just pure finance tasks. So, some context, I mentioned Sovrn being a programmatic advertising exchange. 2016, 2017, a new technology that had been introduced that was very disruptive to the full digital advertising ecosystem. I won't bore you with the technical details, but what it did was allow websites, our customers, the ability to bypass what was effectively a monopoly by Google of the advertising tech stack at the time, and made all the advertisers compete on a level playing field. It increased revenue to the websites and our customers, so which was very good, but it was also very disruptive to sort of everybody. And it was a chaotic time. Things were changing quickly. So we were trying to get a hold of any data that could help us run this technology, sell it, optimize it within our exchange. I had been searching for different data sets to analyze, and in some conversations with our engineers, discovered that with this new technology, all the results from these auctions were available on the webpage. Oh, by the way, which was very exciting to me. And this is very valuable information. This showed us all the bidders, the bid prices, the bid rates, whether they won, whether they lost, who they were. So we worked together. I worked with engineering and our data science team over the next few months to build a version 1 of an internal product that looked across our network and collected a bunch of this data and aggregated it for us. And there was really 2 applications for that. One was to inform a bunch of tests that we then ran across the business on the exchange to really see how we could improve performance through our take rates, through our margins, through pricing, stuff like that. My role was mainly to design and analyze the results of those tests. And what that returned was, no real silver bullet, but more so a number of smaller incremental improvements, which over the next year or 2 we layered in. And that was really the first wave of sort of this network-wide testing, and that evolved over the years. I think today it's probably a very robust machine learning application that's used, but at the time it was sort of the first iterations of that. But the even cooler part of it was that they turned it into a customer-facing product and sold it to our customer base. And so for me, I think the point of that experience was that finance doesn't have to stay in its lane and just do finance tasks. We can influence the business and benefit the business in many different ways, but to do so, you have to be curious and talk to others around the organization and really approach this stuff from a business problem lens and not just a finance and accounting lens.
You brought up mentors several times here, and it seems like you were somebody who was aware of the value that having a good mentor could have. And any thoughts on mentors? How to keep an eye out for them? How to serve mentors?
Yeah, I'd like to say I had a great playbook for everyone, but my experience is unique to me. I think where I've really connected over my roles and my background with individuals that I would consider mentors has been around just challenging problems, working together to find solutions, and going to them in earnest to help guide decision making or find answers to problems. And like I said before, being open to different things, because you never know really where that could come from. It doesn't have to be, hey, I'm a VP of finance, they're the CFO. There's that sort of direct relationship that I follow in their footsteps. It could be, I've had CEOs who I have really looked up to and learned a lot about how to approach business problems from. And so I think you got to be open to that coming from anywhere.
Mentors can be anywhere. I like that. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if there's something most of your colleagues might not know about you. Is there something a pursuit you had in the past, an achievement, a milestone, something most people might not know about you. Anything come to mind, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, these days I'm frankly pretty boring person. I got 2 kids under the age of 7, and I spend a lot of time chasing them around. But I guess I was reminded the other day that I am the Cin7 axe throwing champion amongst the executive team, but I don't advertise that often. I think more seriously, I'm a pretty avid reader. I enjoy. I'm typically in between 3 or 4 books at any given point in time, whether it's fiction at night or nonfiction, early in the morning before the workout or throughout the day or whenever else.
That's a good segue for us. We always do like to ask for a business title, or it doesn't actually have to be a business title, but you have any recommendations for us?
A book I've been rereading, returning to, it's called Thinking in Bets, a book by a woman named Annie Duke. She's a former professional poker player and PhD in cognitive psychology. And the book's really about decision-making under uncertainty. Her sort of premise is, life is more like a game of poker than a game of chess. In that chess, all the information is known to all the participants. There's no element of luck or chance. While in poker, there's hidden information. There's hidden cards. Not everyone has all the information. And luck plays a role in outcomes, which is a lot more like life. We have to make decisions with unknown information. We have to face luck and its impact on the outcomes. And so the book is really about removing cognitive biases from decision making and really just improving, overall decisions.
Neat. We haven't had it before, so we're always excited to get a new title. So thank you for that. We are up to our final question, and this is where we ask you to look forward finally. And we're wondering what your CFO priorities are for the coming 12 months. What would those be?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I think simplicity across the teams, seeing if we can cut down the amount of cycles we're spending and really focus on the highest value impact workflows, and automation through either tooling, potential AI applications. And that's just internally to the team. More broadly across the business, we talked about before, expanding those AI capabilities across all the feature sets that we offer our customer base, and just continuing to grow and do so thoughtfully and profitably as a business.
Erik Rothschild, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks for having me.